Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I have something kind of unique and interesting for you, and it's a very low budget knife, but this is a Boker Magnum knife, and this one goes by the name the Intricate. And so there is a particular reason why I bought this knife, and I don't normally buy Boker Magnum knives, generally because they are very much at the low end of the knife spectrum. They're all produced in China. They're budget knives to every degree. But this particular one, when I saw it, I actually somewhat recognized the pattern and the design. But before I even go further into it, if you look at this knife, if it looks familiar to you, or if the general shape looks familiar to you, I can tell you some of the background of this particular design. So let's just jump back in time 10, 15 years ago. The movie The Dark Knight just came out. So we're looking at a Batman movie. And the villain of that movie was none other than the Joker, played by Heath Ledger. And in that movie, he had a very distinctive switchblade that he brandished. And so after that movie came out, this particular pattern of knife became very popular. Now, of course, this was not the knife he used in the movie. It's simply patterned after it. But after that movie came out, every mall ninja in the country wanted to get their hands on that particular knife, the same one the Joker used. And so this particular knife was patterned after that style, so it is the same generic shape, looks very much like it could be a switchblade. But what we have here is a copy of that knife, and the reason why I bought the Boker Magnum Intricate here is because I actually already own this knife. And so when I saw this one recently released, and I suppose it's their 2021 catalog, I realized that I actually already own the knife, and I kind of wanted to make a comparison to see if over the last 10 plus years, anything in this design has changed. So what we have right here is a no-name version of the same exact pattern. This particular one, I believe I picked up from one of those cheap mall knife shops. I couldn't tell you where or when. I just know I've had this knife for a really long time. And these knives are actually functionally identical. So putting them side by side, you can see they look about the same. Same blade shape, same coloration on the blade, same pocket clip. One difference that you'll notice is the olive drab color on this one, and that is not original. That's something I actually added myself. So the olive drab color we see on here, this is actually Brownell's Aluma-Hyde. And so back when I bought some Aluma-Hyde, I wanted to test it out on some cheap knives, and this was one of the victims of that crusade. So to hold it up close to the camera a little bit, you can see how the wear on Aluma-Hyde works over the years, if you've ever been curious about that particular product. For those of you who are not aware, Brownell's Aluma-Hyde, it's basically a rattle can version of like a Cerakote. So like a Cerakote you could do at home without any special equipment. It just comes out of a can. Not nearly as durable as you can tell, because you can see on all the edges, all this green color has worn off, and we are left with the black finish like we see on the Intricate right here. So that's really the only visible difference. Of course, there's no Boker branding on here yet. This is a 440 stainless blade, and we have the China marking on the reverse. And this one, over the years, it's just been kind of an around-the-house knife. Haven't really carried it or used it all that much. Lockup is pretty late. It is assisted opening, just like the Boker. A pretty weak assist on this particular one, but it's an old knife. It sharpens up easy enough. It gets nice and sharp. But again, I wanted to make the comparison and see if anything has really changed over the years with this knife. And not much has, really. So the newer version right here, the Boker Magnum Intricate, I'm not sure why they chose that name, but they did. Essentially, it is the same knife, and we can see the markings on the reverse. This is a 7CR17 MOV steel blade, and that 7CR is essentially an analog to 440A stainless steel. So the blade steel, again, is very similar to what we have on the no-name knife. They just marked it with the Chinese name for the steel. I do like the Boker logo. That lasered out pretty nicely. It looks pretty high quality. Same thing with the same paint job on the grind. It looks really nice. The lines of the knife, again, are meant to mimic that switchblade style of knife, even though it is an assisted opener, just like any other knife out there. So we can see the action. The action was pretty good out of the box. There was some lock stick when I first took it out of the box, but that's kind of worked itself away just from fidgeting with it. But when it comes to the box, Boker Magnum, they always impress. So you are paying for it, but we have a nice little decorative tin right here. And so if you wanted to gift this knife, you know, your potential buyer or your giftee, they would open it up and see it in a nice custom foam-lined case. And that's always a nice presentation if you're buying the Boker Magnum series knives as a gift for somebody. So there is that. But functionally, it is a perfectly functional knife. It is a low-end steel, but that's not always a bad thing. We can check out the lockup right here. It's right in the center of the tang, so it's not too early, not too late. So pretty much where I would expect it to be. Even the centering is pretty good. You know, first thing when I took it out of the box, I did loosen the pivot a tiny bit just to get it to flip a little better, because sometimes the spring action on these cheap knives out of the box, they come a little tight and they don't want to flip open quite as easily. So we have a flipper tab right here. Decent spring action, fills the hand just fine. We have a 3.5-inch blade. Overall length is about 7.8 inches. And my standby knife, I am going to compare this to the Kershaw Blur. And you can see a side-by-side comparison. And so again, overall size, super, super similar. Handle length is almost the same right there. So I'm trying to do pivot to pivot. So yeah, so the Kershaw Blur is a good comparison, at least in terms of size. But if you were to purchase this knife, what you could really expect, you're going to get a lot of wear on the edges of the aluminum finish. So this is a black finish, and on the edges here, you'll start to see that wear away to bare aluminum. So whether you like that or not, that's just going to be something to keep in mind. You know, honest wear is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's definitely just something to keep aware of if you're buying a low-end knife like this. So the pocket clip is only one position, as to be expected for a low-end knife, but surprisingly, they did make it tip-up carry, so that actually is pretty nice. So you can totally remove it too if you wanted to as well. I don't know why you would, but you could. The only really interesting design aspect of this knife on both of these knives that I would point out, it's kind of odd, is we have a lanyard hole down here at the bottom. So we can see a lanyard hole, but it's not really a lanyard hole, because if you were to put a lanyard in there, you'll notice the blade actually cuts right through it on its way in the handle. So you can't really use this hole for anything. If you were to put a lanyard in while the knife was shut, you would be essentially locking the blade in. And if you put the lanyard in while the blade was open, it would cut the lanyard when you close it. I mean, arguably, maybe you can say you can use this as a lashing point to tie the knife down to something. Maybe use it as a spear, but that's really pushing it, because this is the only point on the knife where you could do that. So I think it's mostly decorative, you know, just to fit the design aesthetic. And when these knives are designed, you know, they're all designed in China, you know, mass-produced knives. The people who make them aren't really thinking them out too much. They're basically just part of a Chinese knife company's catalog, and Boker approaches them and says, hey, what do you got for me? And they give him the catalog, and Boker Magnum, their whole line appears to be inspired by that, or basically the Chinese company just says, pick from this catalog, we'll put your logo on it, and we're good to go. And so Boker just basically says, I want one of those, I want one of those, I want one of those, and that's how we get the Boker Magnum line every year. So if you look through the Boker Magnum series on any knife website, you're going to see that they are all, you know, inexpensive knives, around the $20 price point. And they're all made in China, and they're all 440 steel, very low-end steel. Various designs, some are very basic and don't look too bad, but some are also very extreme and crazy looking. But they're meant to appeal to every kind of buyer, from your basic gas station knife purchaser to someone like me who collects knives and, you know, might want to grab a unique design. But that being said, I don't really buy Boker Magnums. This is the only one I bought in my recent memory, and the only reason is because I wanted to compare it to my old wannabe Joker knife right here. And again, they are the same exact knife, which is kind of interesting, because when we look at the weight, there's a slight weight difference, so I'm not sure what they changed internally here. So the older knife comes in at 4.2 ounces or so, and the Magnum, let's check that out. Coming in around the same, 4.2 4.18. So yeah, it's a little bit different, but for a knife that's mostly identical, I'm not too surprised. But we have full steel liners on this knife. Basically everything you would expect from a budget knife we have here. Nothing really to write home about, but that being said, it's not total junk. Maybe it's junk if you're used to high-end stuff, but if you're just buying a knife to use, to have in your pocket and use as a utility blade, this will serve your functions just fine. I just thought it was curious because I thought the whole Joker knife craze went away, 10 years ago, but we see this kind of resurface under a different name. So it's kind of funny to see Boker Magnum and their line trying to legitimize the pattern when it's been available for so long. So hope this was interesting for you. Do you remember when the Dark Knight movie came out and the Joker knife was popular? It was kind of a unique time in the knife industry. There were some really high-end copies of that knife made, but most people like you and me, we bought stuff like this. We flipped it a few times and threw it in a drawer, and we forgot about it until now. So hope you all have a good day. If you have any questions, drop a comment below, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.